I
Hi,
made it.
Tommaso.
Hi. Sorry.
No problem. How are you?
I'm okay. How about you? How's your day going so far?
Good, thank you. It's very nice. It's a little bit cloudy here in Canton Bern. How's it over there in Lausanne?
It's actually sunny, cold but sunny. The weather I
Oh,
like
nice.
in this season.
You got okay. We've got the fog over here. Well, we're both based in Switzerland right now, so we're going to be starting off the European live cast today. And I'd love to talk to you a bit more about your background, Tommaso. You've been with the company for a long time. Can you tell us first, just introduce yourself, tell us where you work and what your current role is there at Philip Morris?
Yes. So my name, as you read on the screen, is Tommaso Di Giovanni. As it sounds, it actually is Italian, although I also have Swiss nationality and heart in Brazil. And yes, I've been in the company for 21 years. Right now, I'm Vice President International Communications. I'm based in Lausanne, in Switzerland, where Philip Morris International has its operating center. And from here, I have the honor, the pride, the pleasure to lead a number of communicators around the world in all our branches around the world, and a team of approximately 30 people here in Lausanne. My responsibility is really to make sure that people around the world have everything they need to communicate. And the goal that we're trying to achieve is to go fast towards a future without cigarettes. That's really our objective.
Um, That's interesting. You've spent more than 21 years with the company in different roles in different locations, as you mentioned, around the globe. Can you talk about this journey and how these varied experiences have helped bring you where you are today?
Yes, and actually, I'm quite atypical for a communicator in the sense that I first wanted to be a diplomat, then I ended up working as a statistician and economist at some point in my career for Eurostat, the statistical office of the European Union, as a contractor. I remember it was 1998. And I think that background probably forges who I am today, because I'm a communicator who did a lot of economics. I did business development when I joined the PMI as a first role. And then I had several assignments around the world in regulatory affairs, in fiscal affairs, in a number of other functions and locations. I worked in 5 countries around the world. I had 10 positions in the company. So I definitely didn't get bored through those 21 years. And I like to think that if there's something that makes me a bit different in communication, is exactly this varied background. I was able throughout my career to engage in different languages, engage in different cultures, directly talk to people in all the countries where I lived in, namely in France, where I was actually hired, first in Luxembourg, in Italy, in Switzerland, in New York, but across Latin America, in Brazil. And I want to think that that, coupled with my business development and regulatory affairs background, is really what makes me different. I tend to look at communication as something that either is very concrete and moves the needle, or it's almost not worth. I'm almost quite extreme at times, but that's who I am and how I am. And to take a historic look at the last 21 years, I actually was hired by the company in France in 2001. It was March, so I'm almost into my 22nd year. At first, I was working in business development. Then there was a point where the corporate affairs department needed some more technical skills, some more technical knowledge. So they decided to offer me that position. My idea at the time was to become a managing director, so hop around different functions in the company to then lead an affiliate. The truth is, my career took another turn. I did very well in external affairs. So after that, I was offered the position at the PMI press office here in Lausanne. It was 2004. It was winter. It was colder than this. I remember very well. And in the press office, I remember at the time how the company was different. I used to answer the phone saying, sorry, not much to say, call us later, thank you. And that was literally my job at the time. We didn't have a story to tell. And our product was cigarettes. There was very little to say about cigarettes. Cigarettes cause disease. And for somebody who wants to work in comms, that wasn't possibly the most challenging assignment. But then I started getting assignments in Latin America, based in New York. I was in charge of regulatory affairs and communications, so a new landscape. I was dealing with regulation all across the region. It's a region that I love, by the way, because I speak the two languages and I have a passion for Latin America. That's really, for some reason that I can't explain. I just love the culture. I just love the history of the region. So there was a passion for work and a passion for the region. And then because I studied in Brazil, I did part of my studies in Brazil, I was offered to lead the external affairs efforts of our Brazilian affiliate. We are at that time in 2008, and I decided to go in a town that probably not many know. It's called Curitiba. It's in the south of Brazil. It's pretty cold. It's contrary to all the stereotypes you may have about Brazil. And that was one of the most challenging, interesting assignments I had in the company. It's a huge country. We had relatively little resources and big challenges, and it was an amazing time. Also personally, because that's when I met my wife. And then after that, I had an assignment in Rome. Finally, I worked in my country. And after Rome, it's 2012, I received a call asking me if I want to pioneer communications on a new range of products that are much better than cigarettes, reduced risk products, and if I want to be the person who actually pioneers all that area of the company. I took the courage because previous attempts didn't go well, let's face it. So I took the courage, came to Lausanne, and I have to say that was the beginning of a journey that was simply amazing. I grew several positions here in the operating center. I built the team and I spearheaded a change that I'm very proud of because it's a change that's unprecedented in the industry, and we're doing it largely through communications.
Interesting. So you brought up that change before. You talked about the smoke-free future. So what is a smoke-free future for, as you say, the largest tobacco company in the world? What does that look like?
Let me put it this way. It means, imagine a company that's sitting on a product that's been the same for 150 years and that honestly sells well. I mean, and gives you profits every year and growing profits. Imagine a company, though, that decides it's time, because there's the right technology, the right innovation, to disrupt entirely that business and come up with a totally new line of product that includes technology, includes innovation, includes science, something very different from a cigarette. A cigarette is an easy product. I mean, it's easy to manufacture, it's easy to sell, it's easy to buy, and it's easy to use. Think about products that instead have technology, that need recharge, that need cleaning, that need to understand how the product works, that need you to change your habits. Well, we decided to embark into a journey to ultimately replace all cigarettes with products that do not burn. And because they don't burn, they don't generate the high levels of toxic compounds that are found in smoke. And that's something that most people don't know, and that's actually why communications is important. But the biggest issue with a cigarette is when we light a cigarette up, when we turn it on fire. Anything that burns changes chemical composition. It's the same if you think about it. When you eat a burnt pizza, being Italian, that's the example I like to take. That burnt pizza has different chemistry than a pizza that is not burnt, and it's much worse for you. If you think about combustible engines for cars, one of the reasons why they pollute is because there is combustion. It's the same with burnt meat. Anything that burns is much worse than what doesn't burn for our bodies. And it's the same with cigarettes. When somebody burns tobacco and the paper, it kind of turns on a chemical factory. So in the early 2008, we got to a point where, thanks to technology and innovation, we could actually eliminate the burning, but give smokers a taste, a sensory experience that is very similar to what they would find with cigarettes. It took several attempts before then, and it's something that may sound logical, but it wasn't easy to do. It wasn't easy either because we didn't have the technology to reduce the risk or to make it appealing so people switch. But in 2008, actually, we managed to get there. And by 2014, we commercialized, and that's when I came to Lausanne, we commercialized our first smoke-free product, a product that was called IQOS at the time in Nagoya and Milan. Things went well. We realized that finally we had it. We had kind of the holy grail of the industry. And despite the risks, because disrupting an industry is risky, we decided to go all in. By 2016, our CEO decided to go public and make a commitment that we would replace all cigarettes as soon as possible with those products. And that commitment was soon signed by our board of directors, shared with the Security Exchange and Commission. It became our vision. And now our company is fully dedicated to this vision, to the point that we have 900 scientists in our, something you would never think of from a tobacco company, that work for us. And we're even imagining something beyond tobacco and nicotine. One day, we're even imagining lines of products in the healthcare wellness space, thanks also to acquisitions of other companies. So right now, we're really focused on replacing cigarettes with better alternatives, and one day, perhaps going even beyond there.
Amazing. Can you talk about how you're telling this story and what channels you're using and who you're communicating this with? Especially as a global brand that deals in so many languages. And
yeah, well, first thing that I think it's important, if you consider the big disruption, the change that we're going through, that has an obstacle. And that obstacle is the fact that the vast majority of people don't know what I just told you. They don't know what causes disease in smoking. They don't understand that it is combustion. To give you an idea, data from the majority of countries indicate, and it's public data, it's not even our data, that more than 50%, sometimes 60% or more of people believe that it's nicotine that causes the diseases associated with smoking. That's not correct. Nicotine is not risk-free, it's addictive, but it's not what causes those diseases. That causes to be found in a number of chemicals, mostly released when there's combustion in a cigarette. But that kind of confusion is what we need to address if we want to explain to people why the new products make sense for public health. So that's why the role of communication became extremely important in our company, because if you want to spearhead this change, we first of all need to make sure people understand it. And that's why we scaled up our communication significantly. And with this introduction, you will understand why we use literally all channels, all possible channels to communicate. Of course, we started simply by engaging. As I mentioned at the beginning, in the press office, we would simply say, no comment, thank you, I have nothing to say. Then there's a point where we started answering all calls and actually engaging in dialogue. There was a point when our scientists, our leaders would start going at conferences. And now we attend hundreds of conferences in the world every day. We started actually engaging much more with the media, building media partnerships. We started using social media, something that we didn't really do before, social media. And right now we're also expanding into paid, because we know paid is what allows us to get a critical mass out there in terms of communication. So literally, I would say all channels. Then I think your question had embedded a second question, which is how does that mix changes country by country? Well, a lot, because what I also learned through my years working across the world is, first of all, the legislation varies. Our industry is extremely regulated. So there are some countries where we're totally free to interact in dialogue, others that have restrictions that are ambiguous and sometimes may even apply to public discourse. So in those countries, we can't do, for instance, paid. It does happen. In others, we realized very soon that despite the fact that all we think is social media, digital media, new media are the way to go, traditional media are still very important. There are countries, take in Eastern Europe or some countries in Africa or in Asia, where actually the classic TV as we know it or the radio are extremely important. If I want to reach a certain part of the population, even in France, probably the best place for me to be is radio in the morning, especially a couple of radio like France Inter or France Info that really have a resonance with that public. So I would say the mix of channels needs to change in every country, and needs to be appropriate for what you're trying to achieve. Who are you trying to talk to? And based on that, it needs to be considered. Now, I also believe there's nothing like paid when you need to reach a critical mass, because that's really when you control not only the amount of communication, but the message. And I'm sure that many on this call would agree with that.
Absolutely. So we're looking at Outlook today, and I wanted to know kind of if, as you look back on 2022, what lessons have you learned and what will you be taking from these learnings going forward into 2023?
Okay, well, let me start from saying that it's been a couple of very complex years. Honestly, if I had to think of all what we witnessed in 2021 and 2022, 5 years ago, I would never have guessed. Like we were challenged in some of our preconceptions. The idea that the world is a stable place is one. I mean, the war in Ukraine last year clearly told us that's not necessarily the case. And we were coming from the years of COVID, which also challenged some of our assumptions, right? The idea that we're safe and that there's no such thing as a disease that we don't know. It's not true. COVID proven us that we were wrong. And it changed a lot of the way we look at those things, the way we interact with others. I personally wouldn't have been on a Zoom call probably like this before COVID. And I know that many of my colleagues feel the same. Right now, for instance, all our engagements are hybrid. If you remember 4 years ago, it wasn't the case. We still had a lot of engagements in person. So for instance, COVID has totally changed the way we look at our engagement. Right now, I think we're heading towards a world where people will go back to in person, and it's already happening. But I think hybrid will maintain a place. If I look at my team here, probably more than half of it comes to the office regularly now that they can. But there's a big chunk who doesn't come more than twice a week, and they enjoy it that way, and it's absolutely fine that way. So I think the first consideration is COVID has literally changed the way we interact with others, the way we operate, the way we look at some things like diseases. I think and it also created a heightened sensitivity towards things like hygiene, self-care. There's new ways to look at the healthcare systems around the world. So COVID definitely had an impact. I think the war in Ukraine has also shaken our sense of stability. Think about the energy crisis. Who would have thought a few years ago that in all the countries where I listen to the media, now there's a debate on whether they need to use hydrogen or nuclear power to simply deliver energy. The prices of basic consumer goods went up. The sense of security was shaken. There's more investments in defense. I think our world in 2022 was literally shaken from the upside down. I think that will reflect a lot in 2023 in how people see it. The other thing we witnessed, and then I'm going to close the looking back at 2022, is especially because of the war, but not only the war, also the politics in many countries around the world, we finally realized the power of propaganda, the risks of misinformation. And I think there's much more awareness of that than we had 2, 3, 4 years ago. And therefore, if I look at 2023 and I think, okay, what is all this bringing to us, to Communicator? I would say the first thing is people will be, and it's something positive, much more cautious with the information that they consume. They will tend to look more into the accuracy, the credibility of the source. They will tend to believe less into information that isn't credible. And I think for us communicators, that's an important learning, because we will also have to be the credible source of communication if we want to break through. So walking the talk, in my view, so being consistent, being solid in the sources of information that we use will be absolutely paramount in 2023. And then, look, I think there will be also, because of all what happened, a lot more attention from the public to things like sustainability, which is already happening, the environment. I mean, all these discussions about alternative sources, switching to electric cars, or the impact that the war has had on the availability of food. I mean, people will be much more cautious in those places. And I think that's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for companies that want to drive positive change, because this is a perfect moment to do it. And communication can help significantly.
That makes a lot of sense. You talked about the economic instability. As we head into 2023, what do you think brands can do to build brand in a time of this insecurity?
I think it's giving security. I think it's exactly addressing that basic need of insecurity. I think brands will need to more and more be based on purpose, and they will need to be based on consistency around that purpose. People will scrutinize much more the brands, the products. That is already happening, by the way. I mean, we see it around the world, and that actually is encouraging for us because that's what we started a few years ago. But I think for everyone, it will be just the norm. I mean, these changes will increase scrutiny, increase people attention to consistency and stability and credibility of the sources. And I think brands need to absolutely understand that. So there needs to be much more agility as well, because those trends may vary. But ultimately, walking the talk and focusing on purpose will become even more important than they are today. That's my sense. But again, I don't have a crystal ball.
Sure, absolutely. But speaking about your own brand, what are you thinking about in terms of purpose for 2023?
We are continuing with what we've already initiated and perhaps even scaling up that commitment. We're at a point where, and I was talking about our vision to replace cigarettes with smoke-free alternatives. We're at a point where 30% of our revenues come from these products. We have today a growing number of health authorities around the world that are actually supporting those products. Countries like New Zealand or the UK that are even through public health authorities encouraging the change. So the change is happening, and it's happening fast, but we want to further accelerate it. For instance, recently we finalized an acquisition that will give us even more chances to address the demand from smokers for better alternatives to cigarettes. We bought Swedish Match. Swedish Match is, for those who don't know, it is a Swedish company that's a leader in smoke-free, particularly snus and pouches. To give you an idea, 2/3 of their business in the US and 2/3 of this business is smoke-free. Their pouches are 64% of the US market. So for us, it's an important investment because it allows us to expand the products that are smoke-free. This company already has over 3 million consumers. So if we converted to our products 18 million today, 20 million today, we're at 23 already. Process will be faster, but it allows us to do two things. It allows us to enter the US markets because they have 500 salespeople. They have 150,000 point of sales in the country, and it allows us to expand our portfolio of products. This is one of the things we're going to implement in 2023. But other than that, we're going to continue to expand our portfolio of products to make sure that we meet the preferences of consumers. We're going to continue to walk the talk, exactly to what I was saying. Make sure that any claim we make, anything we say is thoroughly substantiated. Actually, in the US, in which I know many who look at us today, watch us today, are based, is the only country that has an authority that really looks through claims made by manufacturers and then reviews those and allows, through an authorization, commercialization with certain claims. Others are going in that direction. But the hope I have for 2023 is that this change accelerates. If you think about it, we're witnessing similar changes in other industries, and the tobacco industry is actually late to a certain extent. If you think about the automobile industry, we're moving away from traditional cars into electric cars. If you think about food, there's all movement away from foods that there's a lot of fat or sugar to better food, more organic food. If you think about plenty of other industries, you will see the same trends. So actually, the real question is, can we finally accelerate the pace of change also in our industry, right? Especially provided that the vast majority of people simply don't quit. So they deserve better alternatives. And honestly, I hope that by 2023 we'll be in shape for our goal, which is that by 2025 we have 50% of our revenues coming from this products, and then we will be a majority smoke-free company.
Fantastic. So switching gears a bit, can you talk about your approach to leadership? Yes.
So look, I think all of us are forged by our experiences, and I think my teenage years really forged my approach to leadership. I played a lot of competitive sports, among others volleyball and beach volleyball, and I was passionate for history. And I think this really forged kind of my approach to leadership, because my leadership style is really, I like to set shared goals and ambitions for my team. I like to make sure that we all agree on where we're heading, that those goals are ambitious. And I like to make sure that we all have clear swim lanes, a bit like in a sports team. Of course, we help each other, but we all have clear swim lanes and we all know what we're heading to and how that goal contributes to the bigger goal. And I like training. I think we all need to train hard to achieve our objectives. And that's probably how my leadership is. So if I look back at my teenage years, that's exactly how I am today. And I'm actually very proud of the team I manage here, because one of the things that I thought at the beginning was, if we're serving the world, we need to represent the world. And we're approximately 30 and we have 24 nationalities, all sort of origins, literally all sort of preferences. I mean, I'm extremely happy that the team is diverse. And I have to tell you something, there's kind of a magic that happens when a very diverse team gets together for a common, bold ambition. And that magic is reflected in what I see in my team. So in this diversity is playing a beautiful, beautiful role. I mean, especially this year, I think it was an amazing team effort, and I've enjoyed it a lot. So I hope this tells you about my leadership. It's difficult to talk about our own leaderships.
Sure, absolutely. And I think as you make a point, having that many diverse voices on the team can help add to the perspective in the work that you're doing as you're forming, especially such a bold plan towards the future. What advice would you give to other marketing leaders to lead their teams?
Especially if it's global teams, my advice is make them truly global. Because very often we tend to stay in our comfort zone. And I see it often, people tend to recruit people from same backgrounds, same nationalities. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes one leader can do. A leader instead needs to be challenged, and diversity challenges you a lot. Plus, if you are literally leading the world, you need to reflect that diversity into your team. Otherwise, you will miss out. You will miss out on subtleties of languages, of cultures, of the interaction with the people that you lead, because simply that's how it works. So that's the first suggestion based on my experience. The second one is, I think as we move into this new 2023, walk the talk, internally and externally. It's extremely important. I think leadership is made of consistency, credibility, and going through bold ambitions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, that makes sense. So we're going to turn it over a bit to questions from the audience. So if you have questions, please enter them now into the chat. We have our first question for Tommaso, which is we touched on this a little bit, but wanted to know what channels and technologies you're using today to enable your teams to communicate effectively around the globe. So I think this is a more internal question rather than the external one you talked about before. Effectively around the globe besides social media.
So the question is about internal. How do we share information so others can operate, right?
Yes, to enable your teams to communicate effectively.
Yes. So look, first thing, I believe in knowledge sharing. When we manage a global organization, knowledge sharing is key. So the first thing that we did when we set this team was making sure that we had a way to share knowledge, a platform that allows you to share guidance, document, messaging, visuals, whatever people need to operate. We believe in empowering our colleagues around the world. And so that's the most important thing in terms of channels to talk to our people, having a platforms that's dynamic on which one can post and share whatever people need to operate. Besides that, then I believe that all that information needs to be explained. So there's a lot of face-to-face interaction, mostly through Teams, Zoom, a bit like we do here. And then when we can, we meet in person, of course, because that is needed to then be able to use the toolbox that's made available through these platforms. And that encompasses webinars, in-person meetings that we have every time we have an opportunity with people from around the globe. I think that in-person interaction cannot be replaced. And then, of course, I mean, what everyone uses, right? From email to phone calls, I mean, you name it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Tommaso. One last question for you, if you have any predictions about who's going to win the World Cup this year.
Look, I can't say anything different. My wife's Brazilian, and I have a lot of friends in Brazil. I need to say Brazil.
I think
And
it's
I
a good,
think they're going to make it because I think they're outstanding. I think only France can challenge them.
yeah, they both have put up a good fight this year so far. Well, excellent. Thank you so much for being here today. Great hearing from you. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you for hosting me.
Take care. Goodbye, Tommaso.